So it started with Americans going to different parts of the world, and the idea was to exchange culture instead of bullets. So it was taking money left over from selling literally leftover ammunition and tanks and things like that, and then funding a program to send people across the world. So the public has paid for the research. Then part of that money also has to pay to publish it, and then yet the public don't have access to it. So there's a whole huge problem with that system. It needs a big revolution, that one. And there's just constant repairs that are going on that your blood system just does automatically, unbeknownst to us. And without that ability, you can bleed out internally, and that can lead to multiple organ failure and, of course, eventually death.
There is an average of 58,000 snakebite deaths every single year in India. Now, that is a negative side of snake venom, but the positive sides of snake venom have and are being studied by my guest today. She has skills as a snake field and film consultant and has a great passion for working with wildlife and trying to figure out how people and wildlife can coexist. Presently, she's working with eDNA, which is environmental DNA. Get excited to learn from today's guest, Christina Zdenek. Welcome, Christina, to the podcast. I'm super stoked that you have taken time out of your day to come on to this show.
My pleasure.
Dr. Christina Zdenek, that is it. Fantastic. Yeah. Now, to start off, could you give us a quick intro of who this Christina is, what you do for work as such?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Queensland. That's my day job.
Right.
So researcher, scientist. I like to call myself an ecologist and a herpetologist. So when the media asks, it's generally the terms I give.
Okay. Beyond
that, I'm also the co-owner and operator of the Australian Reptile Academy, where we train people on
ASH?
ARA.
ARA. Okay.
Yeah. So the Australian Reptile Academy, we train people on the safe and ethical handling of venomous snakes.
Yes.
Australian venomous snakes.
Yes. And how long have you been doing ARA for? So
that's been a couple of years now. Put in through a few hundred people through the course.
Yes.
And then Chris had been doing it for my husband Chris had been doing it for about 3 years prior to me jumping on board.
To joining in. Yeah. And I think I might have done a course with him previously when I was working with him, and I got to have a photo with Squishy. Actually, Squishy's up on the wall. That is Squishy up the very top.
Squishy.
Yes. How's he going? He's still around?
No.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, he was 24 and we lost him.
Oh.
Yeah.
I should clarify also, Squishy is a coastal taipan.
He's well known. A lot of people do know him.
Yes, he is.
He's been on telly a lot. And
he was a great snake. Yeah. Where was he? What was he featured in?
So he did Scope.
Yes, I think I've heard of Scope, yeah.
Yeah, also Catalyst, ABC's Catalyst. So I extracted venom and then put that venom in the host blood. Yes. A sample.
I was going to say, did the host on the TV?
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, straight up. Yeah. Okay. Well, would be a very well known, snake and sure.
And got a lot of people over their fear of handling snakes. Taipans in particular have a fearsome reputation.
They do have an extremely fearsome reputation. Have you handled? I would say you have, but have you handled many wild coastal taipans? Two wild
ones. They're hard to chase down.
Yes, I hear they're very fast.
Very fast. So you've got to, put your
work into it.
Boots on. And it's got to be the right situation too, where there's not like really tall grass right nearby.
Yeah, they get away.
Run up.
And then as well, and then inland taipans. Have you been out searching for inlands yet?
No, I haven't had a chance.
Okay.
So I've worked with a lot in captivity, and for a range of different personalities you find. But have yet to do that bucket list.
Yes. I know a couple of guys that have done it, and they're terribly excited when they find it. Sometimes they go out there or driving hours upon hours just to find something that they didn't actually end up finding. So that part sucks.
But then it means that you'll have to go out again. Gives you an excuse, right? And you just experience new things, even if you see a little gecko. Like we've got amazing diversity in Australia, so if you can just appreciate other things as well.
We do have a lot of amazing diversity. I'm yet to see this the diversity in person, but I have seen there is some spectacular wildlife out there.
I'm sure you've seen lots yourself in all your adventures.
Probably. I seem to remember them. Now, with you do Venom, have done Venom studies. And I've read a couple of your articles on it, tried to understand it, a plethora of language to describe it. With venomous snakes, what would you say one of the key venomous snake experiences that you've had whilst studying snake venom?
I suppose most substantial would be being bitten by a highly venomous snake. That sort of stands out.
What species was that again?
Pseudonea finis, so dugite. So Western Australia's eastern brown.
Yes, yeah.
The equivalent there.
And how long ago was that? And what was the extent, I guess, was there any after effects?
It was about 6 years ago, and I was extracting venom, and besides trying to kill a snake, extracting venom is probably the most dangerous thing you can do with the snake. And
right, you're at the end.
You have to get your hands so close to where the fangs are, and it can go wrong in a lot of different ways.
Right.
And particularly if you have other people in the room as well, then you're having to navigate, like your brain is just constantly shifting between social engagement and snake engagement.
And focused,
And so one would call it multitasking, but really it's multi-failing in that you're rapidly going from one to the other.
Right.
And research has shown that that's what
not
happens.
Good.
And it's not good, especially when you need to be on 100% with these snakes, because they will move so quick in just a split second. And people who have been bitten say, oh, it happened so fast. I didn't even realize it happened till, afterwards. Like, I mean, I did sort of see it coming because I could recognize the behavior and stuff like that. So I saw it as I was pulling away when I was persisting with an awkward angle, and it's embarrassing. Like I was hoping to go my whole career
not get bitten.
Yeah. I'd gone 10 years. So I thought that was pretty good.
That's a solid effort.
That is solid effort.
Effort.
It's funny when people brag about being bitten, because it's kind of like the way I describe it in analogy is, well, if you're a Formula One car race driver, do you brag about how many times you crashed your car? Really
probably not. I haven't thought about it like that. Yeah, but
it's kind of like that.
Yeah,
so
well, I
find it embarrassing and not like a
not
trophy.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, right. I have actually thought about like what that is to other snake catchers and wildlife people, because I have the idea that like you want to try and not get bitten for as long as you can. Okay, I got that part right by the sounds of it. But then I've seen some people like it's like once you get bitten, let's see how many times you get bitten and not die. I've seen some that I've just that's what it looks
let's
like.
Just play with our lives.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. There's some people have just gotten bitten so many times, and I hear all these effects that can come after being bitten by a snake. And I mean, these guys have. Obviously not died yet, but probably life expectancy a bit lower now.
And your kidney function goes down. And
I hear kidneys are important.
Yeah,
they are important. Now, that was when you got bitten. Which we don't talk about. We don't talk about that. What was your first introduction to or first experience milking a snake? How old were you? How long have you been in the industry for? Up until when you got up to that point?
Yeah, so probably 16 years, I'd say, that I've been in the snake industry.
Okay.
Wildlife, a lot longer than that, but I just didn't have the opportunities, as I sort of had a career in basketball, which was pretty consuming. And then so shifting to conservation and snakes. So, yeah, I suppose at that stage, I guess it was pretty pivotal for me to be able to jump on board with a snake awareness and education company.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did that seasonally for 8 years. And yeah, that was a really good introduction to me because I didn't grow up in Australia. I've spent basically my whole adult life here.
Right.
And I live here and this is my home.
Right.
But yeah, came from California actually. So won this Fulbright fellowship that enabled me to come over. And
Fulbright. What is Fulbright? So I guess the idea is that we can have a bit of an idea of what this academic world is, because there's a lot of amazing terminology that some of us might not know. But what is Fulbright?
So Fulbright, that's after an old senator who's now since passed, but it's the Australian American Fulbright Commission that gives Fulbright fellowships, and it's to people who are, well, it started with Americans going to different parts of the world, and the idea was to exchange culture instead of bullets. So it was taking money left over from selling literally leftover ammunition and tanks and things like that, and then funding a program to send people across the world. To basically have a more peaceful world.
Yeah, peaceful world. That sounds like a good idea. Okay, so you're part of that process, right?
Yeah, I suppose. And then since then, the Fulbright, I guess, entity or that commission grew to having a reverse way. So then other countries around the world sending their scholars to America. Right. So it's a considered a prestigious merit-based scholarship, and it funds you for a year generally, depending on which, whether you're a fellow or I forget what their other term is for
another fellow.
Yeah, a higher up level fellow. Different stages of your career. Yeah. So I got the lower one, and it enabled me to come over and start a degree at the Australian National University, and I'd sort of always wanted to come to Australia.
And when was that?
That was 2008. 2008.
Came over from America.
Yeah.
And now okay. And you've always wanted to go to Australia. So why did you want to go to Australia? Was it the weather, or was it the wildlife that was interesting you?
Definitely wildlife.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I had actually come here for a basketball tournament when I was having a career in basketball for 15 years.
15 years of basketball tournament skill basketball. Yeah, right on. Okay.
Yeah. So that was like a previous life. And in doing that, I was able to have a tournament here, and just something about being here, I felt more at home than I actually ever had.
Right.
I was sort of like awkward, didn't really fit in. I grew up actually in LA, and I had reptiles as pets.
Yeah.
And so although I wasn't able to see wildlife on a regular basis, I could see these beautiful, amazing creatures up close and an intimate way, sort of every day after school, just come and like watch them, tend to them. And so I got hooked from a very young age. And to be able to come to Australia to explore and see all these amazing creatures, but really to help conserve them. And that's why I wanted to choose Australia, because it's very difficult. It's, to me, a failed argument to go to a third world nation, having come from a first world nation with all of the, goods and services and everything that I've got access to, phone in my back pocket and all the rest, a laptop and streaming services and whatever. And then try to tell someone who's just trying to make a living and maybe get a bit of education for their child not to clear that block of land so that they can make some more money. So it was a failed argument in my mind. I was considering going to, some other third world nation in a Spanish speaking country, because I speak Spanish. But I thought that, that'd be a failed argument to start with. So I figured a place that's technically a rich country but has serious conservation issues, I think there's room for improvement there. And I felt that I could help contribute.
That. Yes, fantastic.
Moving forward.
Yeah, and it does look like you have that you're working in that direction to make a difference. Exhibit W being squishy. I mean, he's well known and showed people that they're not as bad as they made out to be. Now, with your that's very cool. I'd like to get into the academia and your experience in the academic world and nature and that whole field. But you moved over in 2008 with basketball. You said that was you spent 15 years on. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Was that's a lot of heart, passion, energy, and
more passion.
yeah.
I always think of that when I hear that.
You were that person. You were that person, the original one. And I would think that could be a potentially challenging decision to make if you feel like you have a career in that, or were you feeling that stick was kind of burning out and you were ready for it, and so it wasn't that hard?
Yeah, great question. I was ready in the end. It was hard to feel like I was just throwing away all that hard work, but in reality, it enabled me to pay for university and not have any debt, which is, anyone knows about like the debt
pretty
system.
Well.
Yeah, so it covered books, tuition,
Amazing.
stipend, and and my tuition. So, there's so many Americans who for 50 years or their whole life are trying to pay off their student loans because they don't have a HECS system. Okay. So they have to pay interest on their loan, whereas I was fortunate enough to where I was debt free as soon as I left university, and so I could just start and focus, move forward, and not constantly have to tend to that. Yeah,
that is amazing. That is a weight that has allowed you to do all this stuff.
Yeah. I didn't answer your actual question though. Was it difficult to move on?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Was it difficult?
Yeah. So initially it was because I had a couple offers to play on Canberra Capital. So like an agent back in the States was going to set it up. And then later I was just sort of mucking around down there, like a few years after I'd sort of moved over. And they're like, I sort of like did some moves, and a minute later the coach who was there was like, yeah, Canberra Capitals. And I was like, but I can't just stop my whole life and give up all of my commitments and I guess passion for wildlife conservation, because that's what it would do, just take over my life all over again. And when you think about just injuries start to get more prevalent, it takes longer to heal over time as you get older. Like I could do it, but I think it was diminishing returns.
Okay.
In that, all the sort of character building that was going to happen from doing like hardcore sport. I had considered I'd already done that.
You've done that. That part is completed.
Was sorted. Okay. Yeah, everything else in life seemed easier after the things that I sort of had to deal with.
Right on. So that would you say then that your basketball career, character-wise, what you'd worked up to, has allowed you emotionally and psychologically to be able to better handle the academic world in regard to relating to people?
Yes, and also the physical side in terms of field work. And, so a lot of my academic career has involved field work and pretty technically hardcore field work, sort of being remote and really hard, challenging conditions for months on end, often alone, those sorts of things. So having confidence, I think basketball instilled that, especially as, women tend to have more challenging, have a greater challenge with that. But yeah, just being hard, I suppose, and being able to just
be able to rough it out. You're in the bush.
Rough it out, and it's just I've done it way harder.
Yeah,
like 24 suicides in a row. If anyone knows basketball, suicide.
No idea. I was like, that doesn't sound good.
It is very, like 5 is a lot. And that was an insane day. So suicide is where people who watch your podcast probably are into wildlife, so I apologize. This might be boring, but
now we know what a suicide is.
Suicide is like going from the end to the free throw line, back, half court, back, other free throw line, back, and half court back. And you have to sprint and touch the line every time. Right. So you're up, down, and you have to make it a drill time.
Or a part of the...
It's a punishment.
Oh, right. Okay, right.
We were punished a lot.
And so you did 25 was...
Yeah, 24.
24 was the most. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That does sound a lot of exercise and full on. So, but hey, now you can do field work, piece of cake. You can pretty much jump over the mountains. There'll be no issue. Now, with I want to get into the academic world, a world that is covered in so many large descriptive words to explain something that two people in the field understand greatly. Now, venom studies is what would you say majored in? What would you say you have majored in?
Yeah, for me, a major is my undergraduate, and that was a Bachelor's of Science. That was in ecology and evolutionary biology. However, after that, when you go to postgrad, my PhD was in toxinology. So looking at snake venom and effects on our body and how well antivenoms
actually work.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Right on. Now, for an antivenom, we know what an antivenom is. For those, if you guys don't know what an antivenom is, it's pretty much you get given it after you get bitten by a snake to keep you alive. As far as I'm aware, how it's created an antivenom, it's the antibodies, the venom or small dosage of the venom is injected into, say, a horse. Is there any other animals that you would say is used, or is it primarily equestrian, the horses?
Yeah, so it depends on what country, and sometimes it's sheep.
Okay.
For spiders, it's rabbits. So yeah, it depends on the quantity of venom that you have. So spiders very small, so they end up using a smaller animal.
Okay.
But yeah, equine, and it's really it's been a prominent thing, antivenom production in Australia, because we don't have a lot of the diseases that can be transferred to humans because it's an animal product that then is injected into your blood.
Yes.
And so therefore you don't want to have encephalitis or something like
that.
No,
it doesn't sound like you would, no.
Yeah, and so Australia's largely been free of those types of diseases that otherwise would be transported through the medicine to the person. So
right, yeah. So
you're at the forefront of antivenom production from the early 1900s. Yeah.
Okay, right on. So early 1900s, Australia has been at the forefront, is what you're saying.
Yeah, originally the idea started in France, hence it's called antivenin to start with. There was a scientist there who sort of worked out that you could actually utilize the immune system of another animal to then assist humans' immune system in the right moment. But in terms of antivenom production for all of our against our snakes, and just early on when it was starting to become possible that scientists were forging the way, there's a lot of Australian scientists who were part of that big
jumped on board.
Yeah, that big push forward.
Yeah, and that was in 19 again.
Is it 38?
1938.
The first
about
one was tiger snake antivenom,
Australia,
and then up to I think it was 68. Eventually, the funnel-web antivenom. So initially tiger snakes were the most prominent
species of snake that was
medically
encountered
significant.
by people.
Back then. So it's swapped to eastern brown snakes now.
It's definitely
or brown snakes, I should say, Pseudonia just in general.
Yes.
So they sort of produced antivenoms as they were needed, and they realized so by the end, once they had several antivenoms for different genera, groups of snakes, then they still realized that black snake wasn't touched by any of the existing antivenoms. So then they needed to develop the black snake antivenom, which was the last snake one to be developed. And the mulga snake wasn't touched by the other ones. Its venom was just too dissimilar.
Okay.
And so the antibodies, there wasn't that cross-reactivity.
Yeah, okay. With antivenoms, because I think we finished with the antivenoms, and we know that taken from a horse, antibodies from the horse's blood system.
Yeah, immunized,
and then synthesized into a product that purified that into a product that then can be injected into us, which then makes us stay alive longer. How many antivenoms are in Australia? Is there a large amount of different kinds of antivenom, or is there just a few general antivenoms that are used not just cross species, but cross species, but also used, like, say, can you use snake venom for spider venom? Is that something that's possible or not really?
So yes and no is the short answer there.
Okay, right.
So we've got 6 different antivenoms. So there's the tiger snake, death adder, taipan, brown, black, and sea snake. So those are 6 antivenoms, yet we have 107 species of venomous snakes.
I'm pretty sure we have more than that.
Yeah. And so what happens is they get binned into there, and hence the snake venom detection kit, which is one of the many reasons why we're actually counterintuitively lucky when it comes to snakes here in Australia, is that we are the only country since 1979 to have a snake venom detection kit, which allows doctors to not have to rely on symptoms alone when it comes to antivenom choice.
Right.
And that's can be a problem otherwise because there are overlapping symptoms between different species.
Misidentifying. Yeah.
And then if you give the wrong antivenom, they're not recovering. Do you give more of that or do you try another one?
Right.
And
it's just
over antivenom load, you've got this novel protein going in your body and it's from a foreign animal. And so you can have this reaction, serum sickness or anaphylaxis. Anaphylaxis.
What is anaphylaxis? Break us down for a little bit, because anaphylaxis often a word I hear used when in association with snakes, getting bitten by snakes. I believe Chris has had reactions. I think it was a brown tree snake. He was tagged by it and he reacted to it.
That's right.
Could you explain what anaphylaxis is?
Yeah, so it's a hyperreaction from your immune system to a foreign body or protein in your body. So typically, brown tree snake venom, it's not very potent, 100 times more potent to birds than it is to humans, because that's their food source, and they evolved to, for the venom to target their prey and immobilize that. And we're just often collateral damage, and last resort, they'll use it to defend themselves. Yeah, so what happened in that case is he got an anaphylactic reaction. So he started, instead of getting snake venom symptoms, he was getting anaphylactic symptoms. So if somebody's been stung by a bee and they're allergic to bees, or peanut allergy, everyone will relate to that.
Big one, yeah.
So you start getting really itchy. You might break out in hives or blisters. Itchiness is a really big one. That is not a snake venom symptom. That is an anaphylactic symptom. And so you would need antihistamines, but also possibly adrenaline if you can get that as well. And that's what they would give you in hospital. So, you'd have, what are the brands of antihistamine? Phenergan.
I have heard, Phenergan, yes.
Yeah,
funny
so
name.
In Australia, you get that. But yeah, that's what an EpiPen is. It's a little dose of adrenaline.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, Chris has an acquired snake venom allergy.
Okay.
And so
acquired means he didn't have it, and then he
acquired over time.
Okay.
And
it sounds like an investment, like you want your portfolio to grow. I'm just going to add money.
You don't want this. You really don't want this. No. Because imagine dying from a brown tree snake. How embarrassing would that be?
You wouldn't know.
God. But it acts really quickly. So that's the dangerous side of it.
Anaphylaxis does?
Anaphylaxis does. So a lot quicker. And there's not really first aid unless you have an EpiPen or like adrenaline Phenergan. Then your SOL, you just have to get to hospital ASAP because your windpipe can start to close in and you not be able to breathe
due to the swelling.
Due to the swelling, yeah. So swelling is
breathing's hectic important. So definitely get to hospital fast.
Yeah. Whereas with snake venom, we have the first aid. So, pressure immobilization technique. So we've got the bandage, you can put that on and then immobilize. And all of a sudden, you as long as you're not moving, you stay still and calm, you can really just gain yourself 6 to 12 hours of time before needing to get to hospital. You compare that to anaphylaxis, it can be a matter of tens of minutes.
Yeah, right.
Unless you have that adrenaline.
Yeah, that's pretty serious.
And adrenaline breaks down as well through heat and sun. So every year, people replace their EpiPens. It could be a couple $100.
Yes. Okay. And because old mate keeps it in a cooler, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
That's why that would make sense.
He would always bring his cooler.
Yes, he would.
It wasn't lunch he was bringing.
It was not lunch.
It was his life-saving.
I think he even because he found it. I wouldn't. Do you know if that same cooler was the one that he used to put the Taipan in that he found?
Oh, it was too.
Yeah? Yeah. I'm sure he doesn't have that many.
The Ivanhoe Taipan. Yeah. The blue and white jobby.
Yeah. So I should also clarify, there wasn't a live one. He just chucked it in an esky. It would unfortunately have been hit by a car. And it's now in the Queensland Museum.
Yeah. There was a very, very rare specimen and sighting, because it had been 10 years since one had been recorded from that area. And that was the first one. The western slopes of, like Dagulan National Park and Mount Nebo. And so sort of by Ivanhoe. Yes. And so people had known that taipans used to be there, but sort of hypothesized that they no longer were there. Their range had been contracted to further north. But as soon as he saw one dead alongside the road, he thought, this is an incredibly important observation. It had just died as well.
Yeah, well,
and it was in perfect nick because it had only been knocked.
Yes.
And there's just a little bit of blood. So just, any future scientists wanting to do something on taipans can go to the museum, measure whatever they need to.
Yeah, because there's no damage. Yeah. 'Cause I was actually talking to the guy that was with Chris, the tree lopping fella.
True.
Yeah, so I was just talking to him yesterday. He's like, yeah, this guy should taipan in a thing. And I was like, hey, I know that guy. I know the I was like, I've got a full picture now. I said, okay, so that's, he did say it looked like it had just been hit. He said
it took the place of his lunch. So he actually was using it for his lunch at that stage. But the taipan record was much more 100%. Important.
Okay, so that was actually quite valuable. The 10 years not being seen. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah, it gives you hope. Like maybe they are still here, and
actually,
systems
and
are still intact. And
I think we even found another one.
Yeah, there has been a more recent one.
Yes, I think one of our people may have found.
And it was still the Western Slopes.
Yes, and I think it was alive as well. It got taken care of. Yes, and then it was released back into the environment. I believe so. I could be wrong about the last part, but it was alive.
That makes me happy.
Yes, it was alive. Well, that's the point. It was alive.
That's a good conservation story.
Yes, that is. Yes. So Venom. What happens when you get bitten? Anaphylaxis. You were just explaining anaphylaxis, and that's pretty much what it is. It's a swelling. It's a reaction on the body. Not everyone has an anaphylactic reaction to snake venom.
It's very uncommon.
It's very uncommon.
Yeah,
now, you said it was, in Chris's case, it was acquired. Is that unique, and it's not everyone will acquire an anaphylactic reaction? Because I understand also with overseas snakes, some people in America, I believe, I don't think there's any in Australia, but some people in America, snake keepers, they intentionally let snakes to bite them, so they build up antibodies in their bodies. And so are they potentially going to have an acquired anaphylactic reaction, or is that only sometimes some people you can't really figure out who's going to have it? Yeah,
so there's a lot of things to comment on there. So with those people, the key is that kind of like how we immunize horses, it needs to be a regular and frequent dose that you get. Okay. So your immune system, if you do it infrequently, there's a greater chance of actually just having an anaphylactic reaction rather than actually a normal immune response. Mm-hmm. So your immune cells will remember that toxin because it has seen it, within the past month or two or something like that. And then it will continue to produce those antibodies because it's been triggered again, sort of, but
recurring. Yes.
Yeah. But there's a lot of problems with that, is that it can go wrong. What's your dosage for one? And also it can have a great impact on your kidneys over time. And
so that's what you're saying is it's still not suggested to go around and get bitten by snakes.
Don't do that. And also, do you want to do that with every potential snake you might be bitten by? So that would only work with that particular snake. Okay. So you're just going to, overload your immune system and just constantly get bitten by all these snakes. So we need to use other animals to produce anti-venom.
Yes, okay, with a larger mass as well.
Yeah, it's very risky what they're doing. I don't condone it at all. Yeah, I think it's silly, actually.
I think that's completely fair. It's completely fair.
And I think some of them have lost their marriages over it as well.
Right. Yeah, okay. Well, blokes are not waking up far out. The venom's obviously affecting his listening ears. Yeah, maybe. And now, also, Australian snakes. You mentioned also just with the compression style and how we can have up to 12 hours to get to hospital. To my understanding, that method only works with Australian snakes because Australian snakes' fangs are shorter than overseas snakes, generally speaking. Is that the case? Does that compression bandage method work with overseas snakes as well as it does in Australian snakes, or not?
It depends on the species, is the short answer.
Okay.
So the reason why it works so well with Australian snakes is largely because the effects we get from our species here is systemic effects. So neurotoxicity and hemotoxicity, so affecting the nerves and bloods respectively. However, when you go to somewhere like America, and the vast majority of their venomous snakes have only local effects. So the cytotoxicity, just disrupting, like bursting your cells and having necrotic issues on the surface. As soon as you put a bandage on, you're effectively increasing the concentration there instead of it being diluted throughout your body. So it's thought that it might make it worse. And so it is not promoted as a first aid technique, this pressure mobilization technique, as a first aid for snake bite in America. They say just get to hospital, stay calm, stay still, and get to hospital as soon as possible. That's like their CDA
thing
says so. Yeah, they what's CDA stand for?
Scientific
data.
Scientific.
Anyway, their
stands for something.
Their health board. So from the government top down, that's what they decided upon. Yeah. It'll come to me later.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if not, I'll put up on the screen so we know, because that is very interesting. And so that there's no other extra methods if in America you get bitten.
Some say to raise the bitten limb above the heart, and so that's just to assist the dilution of the venom further. So you get basically a lower concentration at the bite site, and therefore a lower chance that you might lose your finger, your hand, or possibly your arm if it's a really big snake and you do the wrong thing, like move around a lot.
Or get bitten.
Yeah. Yeah. But depending on, like if you go to the Philippines, for instance, you have this dichotomy where depending on what you're bitten by, you would do different first aid. So they've got the Philippine spitting cobra over there, Naya philippinensis. And for that, you're supposed to use a compression technique, and that could save your life in a similar sort of way like ours, because you have systemic effects of neurotoxicity, hemotoxicity. However, they have pit vipers there, and for those, it's just local effects, and therefore you wouldn't put on the bandage.
Right.
The difficult thing here is identification of snake species by the general public is notoriously terrible. And so when you're thinking of snake educators from around the world, do you then try to convince people to get better at snake ID, or do you just say, okay, well, you're more likely, you're better off losing a limb than your life, so put on the compression bandage. So we're still like up in the air about what people should be doing. And I think some more research would probably be helpful in this space. And a lot of people still have like a lot of traditional ways of dealing with snakebite around the world.
The venom out.
Cutting. So don't do all of these things. So
don't do it. Okay.
Yeah. So cutting, sucking, black stones, drinking alcohol, plant extracts, electric shock therapy. These are all terrible things that don't work, and it can often exacerbate the problem. For instance, they used to cut open taipan bites, and taipans disrupt your coagulation, your ability to clot. And so you've just created a massive wound, and now you're just going to bleed out even more, as if bleeding out internally wasn't
bad enough. Yeah.
You're just like externally bleeding out as well. So
wow. Yeah, and electroshock therapy. Like, well, how would you got an electric chair in your living room that you just jump in, or you just two forks and
two leads, positive and negative lead on a battery? I'm not sure exactly how they.
We're not giving ideas.
This. No, don't do this.
Okay, you don't.
And alcohol, it makes you more anticoagulant.
Yeah.
So again, limits your body's ability to clot, and a lot of snake venoms, particularly in Australia, are already doing this to you, and it means that you will just slowly bleed out internally unless you get that antivenom, soon enough. Yeah. If you are indeed envenomated, there's a thing called dry bite, so you don't just automatically give someone.
Yes, and a dry bite, often I hear also we're just touching that lightly, dry bites is when you get bitten and you don't get envenomated. It's a dry bite.
It's a choice. Yeah. The snakes have a choice. They're not just creatures of genetic instinct. There's actually some cognition going in.
Yes.
And based off of how severe the situation is, like if you just tried to kill the thing, you're likely to cop a full blow of that venom.
And it's not aggressive. Terrified. It's defending it. It's defending itself. And I try and clarify
vulnerable
that.
Creatures. Yeah. No, absolutely. What have they got to do? They haven't got huge teeth. They don't have a a tail that they can whip you like a monitor lizard. They haven't got horns that they can ram you with. What are they left with? And, you know, they're just super vulnerable, and so many things would eat them if they can. So they're always just wanting to be hidden. You know, they're really, I say snakes are cowards. That's that's a default position.
I did hear that because you did speak at on a TEDx show at UQ or UQ TEDx, and you did use that phrase, yes, that they are cowards. And
it's a good soundbite. Media likes that one.
And exactly, it does, because it's a soundbite. You said it pretty well yourself. Now, you said you used a word before, systemic. Now, I would like to Now, I'd like to
define that.
Yes, clarify also that word, and also maybe just a couple words for when you first started out in the industry. What were some words that you found challenging to understand at first, or the phrasing or something like that?
Yeah.
What were some of those that you, including systemic and whatnot, like? Give us a couple options.
Yeah. So what comes to mind initially was the whole trying to understand that a procoagulant or clot-inducing snake, how can that make you anticoagulant and bleed out? To me, that's
a great question. Do
right?
Tell me.
Okay. So it's a little bit complicated, so try to stick with me here. But what was difficult for me is that I didn't understand the human body to start with. So that was hard about jumping from ecology to toxinology, is that not only having to learn, you know, this microbiology and, you know, about toxins and how they operate, but it's learning the flip side of how they're disrupting your physiology.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to know how it works to start with, to know how it's disrupting.
Yes.
So we have a coagulation system in our blood. So it's a series of proteins that, you know, sort of like dominoes, just knock each other over and activate one to the next.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so you've got a series of these proteins, right? And those, once they've been activated, say you cut yourself, you know, you've got some tissue factor released, and that triggers the cascade to start because you want to stop the bleeding, right?
Yes,
so
definitely.
It's a brilliant system. It's evolved, you know, millions of years ago across, you know, vertebrates, and even invertebrates have a form of this. But the point is that as soon as they're activated, they are consumed. They're used up. You can't then use them again. So it's like Pac-Man. Once it's bitten one bit off, that bit can't go back on.
Right.
Okay. So they're consumed.
Mm-hmm.
So what snake venom does is, because we have a large volume of blood, so we act, what happens to us is different than what happens in their prey.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think of a small rat that's going to be envenomated by, say, a brown snake.
Okay.
That huge amount of venom relative to the blood volume.
Size,
yeah. What happens is you create a relatively large blood clot that travels to the brain, creates a stroke.
Right.
And that means that animal can no longer function. It's, you know, motor neurons, it's
not working properly.
Yeah. So the brain is unable to tell its muscles and to send the signals. Okay. Because it's no longer getting oxygen and blood flow there.
Right.
Okay. So they're incapacitated.
Mm-hmm.
So
small animal incapacitated.
Small, yes. From a stroke, because of big volume. As soon as you put that same amount of venom, though, into a large volume of blood, like a human, like an adult human, I should say, you create lots of small clots.
Right.
They're not big enough to occlude or block your
pathway to the brain, so to speak.
Yeah, it's not large enough to stop blood flow in your arteries and in your brain. So it's unlikely to create a stroke. There's cases like with bothrops, these, you know, pit vipers in South America, where there has been stroke from.
Okay, because the clotting has been so intense.
It's just been a really big volume of venom, and particularly in small people. So kids are more at risk to actually, because
smaller body.
It's smaller body, higher venom to blood ratio. It's a higher concentration.
Yeah.
But essentially, when an adult human is envenomated, typically you have all these small clots that are created, And as I said, it's not enough to create a stroke, but it does consume these clotting factors, those proteins that, as I said, were like dominoes.
Dominoes, yeah.
You can't get that back straight away.
Yes.
So your body has to resynthesize those proteins. That takes 14 to 16 hours or so.
Okay.
In that time, you're really vulnerable to bleeding out internally.
Right.
So just moving around, me doing this, I've created small bits of damage inside these small little capillaries, and there's just constant repairs that are going on that your blood system just does automatically, unbeknownst to us. And without that ability, you can bleed out internally, and that can lead to multiple organ failure and, of course, eventually death. So staying still is your number one friend. And also this compression bandage, of course, to prevent it from getting from your lymph nodes into your blood.
Which then
transports it to the rest of your body in a matter of, minutes.
Very fast.
Very fast.
Yes.
Yeah. So that to me
was a challenge.
Well, I didn't understand that whole concept that we would be bleeding out internally without the ability to make these small repairs all the time.
Right.
So just through walking around, like I thought you had to cut yourself to activate the clotting cascade.
Yeah.
But I was wrong.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay, well that was a fantastic description. Thank you.
A little bit long, sorry.
Yeah, no, but that does make sense. So that's the difference between procoagulant and a coagulant.
Anticoagulant. So
right.
it induces a clot.
Yes.
Anti prevents a clot.
Right.
There's another thing,
pro-clot.
Pseudo-pro, which is a bit more complicated. Don't go into that.
Okay, okay, yeah. Pseudo, I was going to say it's in between. Okay, so procoagulants, anticoagulant. Through reading some of your works, yes, one of the papers, snake venom's systemic. Thank you, you are amazing.
Come back around.
Yes, so what does that mean? But then I want to then go into breaking those terminologies down as well.
Yeah, so systemic basically means throughout the rest of your body as opposed to just locally on the limb.
Okay. Yeah. Right, so it's just whole thing. It's that easy.
Yeah,
it's truth.
So throughout your system, and that's where it's can be really problematic. You don't want a snake venom to be systemic.
No. Okay. What would be a non-systemic snake venom? Something that's local. What terminology is there a term that you would use to describe that? Locally systemic?
Yeah, not systemic. Local effects only.
Yeah, okay, cool. Okay,
yeah,
no fancy
there's not a similar antonym.
Cool, okay. Well, with your papers and your thesis and the journals that I read, and could you, if I can explain the question properly, could you break down the hierarchy of what those mean and the importance of each one? If the list is too long, forgive me, and we can just do a couple, but if there's only like 6 or so categories, what are those and what are their purposes?
Of my papers?
You got what is a scientific paper? What is a journal?
Oh.
What is a thesis?
I see. Yeah, sure.
That sort of thing. So if this is like, yeah.
Yeah. So in academia, as opposed to say industry, the currency is effectively scientific papers. So we're in the game of producing knowledge, and the best way that as a human society on planet Earth we know to do so is a scientific method.
Okay.
And so there's, you have a hypothesis, you test that hypothesis, and then you make conclusions off of that, often with, mathematics and statistical analyses and stuff. And then you write it all up, and it often takes a few years to turn this whole thing around. It's not a quick process, because it then goes to peer review. And what that means is that someone who's an expert in the field will assess your work and say, well, how's the scientific rigor here? Have they done X, Y, Z? And then they'll give you a review. And so that's after you've sent it to a journal. Sort of skipped a step there.
Okay.
So a scientific journal is a journal that produces peer-edited papers.
Okay.
And a paper is a body of work that someone's put out based off of their observations and the research where they've employed the scientific method. So papers in academia, that's kind of, as I said, it's a currency. It's like how many papers you've produced, and it allows you the more and higher quality ones, like in higher quality international high impact sort of journals, means that you have a better chance of moving up the academic ladder, possibly getting an ongoing academic position, which is like a unicorn job, to be honest.
Okay.
Particularly in terms of like wildlife and ecology. But yeah, so that's a little bit about papers. And once it's been published, so it's gone through the peer review and that sort of thing, and you've responded to the reviewer's comments, and it goes to the editor and they assess those things, you've had a chance to improve it and address all the issues, whether it be a statistical problem or you needed more data or something like that. You need to address it from another aspect, consider something else. Anyway, it gets published, and all of a sudden, this is new knowledge of the world. And if we have like this much knowledge on planet Earth, your one paper would be like a bit
smaller than a pinprick.
Yeah, it'd be just a grain of sand.
Yeah.
So, whilst it's little contribution, it's a buildup of this over time.
Stack up.
That now it guides our future research and a lot of times management as well. Like, we want to use evidence-based information to guide our decisions as a society, right? Because otherwise we'd be lost and biased and just having to rely on
personal feelings,
a really old book
not
or
fact.
something like that, like religion I was referring to there.
Right. Okay. Yes.
So in order to innovate, move forward, and have a good society, in my opinion, it needs to be based in science. That's the best way that we know to move forward. It's based on data. It's based on information, not just like someone's thought or a story or a bias, because everyone's biased. So
I mean, yes, we are all
we
biased.
Need science to guide it.
There's science, I think, has extreme importance.
It needs to be communicated too.
But clearly, yes. I don't know if science yet answers all questions, but I know that science is very important for us to be able to see. To be able to see the world, describe the world, and then be able to have the information for us to then teach those who are not yet understanding what we understand. If that kind of makes sense.
Because we're not born with knowledge, right? Like,
no.
So it needs to be taught, it needs to be learned. Like, I didn't know about snakes, until I was taught and had experience with them, and I think it could be inspirational for people to realize, oh well, if I just read books and have interactions and have a mentor and that sort of thing, I can acquire the knowledge too. I wasn't born in Australia,
No.
I actually came from overseas, and some people, it was rare, but when I was doing snake education, well, I still do, but when I was doing those shows with the general public, they sometimes say, oh, why isn't an Australian doing this? Like, I had someone like shout that as they were leaving. I was like,
yeah, really?
That's incredibly rude.
Yeah, right.
I'd like to see how much you know about snakes. Let's stick with the facts here.
Yes. Yeah.
It's about how much passion you have and how much interest and
it's not where you're born which determines where you go. It's
what you do
with what you have. Yeah.
So, and I know someone in particular that comes to mind is a prominent ecologist at Australian Wildlife Conservancy isn't from Australia. And yet this person is guiding how we operate on very large scales in terms of conserving Australian wildlife. And oftentimes it can be an international person coming over that then has the appreciation for Australian wildlife that people just might take for granted here.
Yes, I have seen that, come to play. Yes, so it's good. It's interesting to know that you've also made that observation. Now, I would love to get into, thank you for explaining that. I would love to get into your story more so of how you have managed your way through to now. But grants, could you give a rough overview of the importance of a grant?
Yeah.
How one may attain a grant. Doesn't have to be in depth, but so someone has somewhere to maybe start off if that's ever something that someone wants to do.
Yeah. So it's very heavily prominent in academia. So at universities, grants sort of dictate what research will get done. So whether it's been funded or not.
Yep.
And that determines whether that person has a job oftentimes, unless you have a continuing ongoing position where you're a lecturer, and that sort of pays your salary because, you've got degrees as the product that's sold at the end sort of.
I see, yes.
In a way. But for those who don't have an ongoing position like
Right.
myself, so we're called early career researchers, ECRs, it's the acronym, you have to constantly win grants, and that will then pay your salary and will hopefully also give you some project running costs as well per year. And now grants in academia is one thing. There's also some grants for community active work. If somebody wants to win a grant to restore this bit of land or something, or to build a new center for the footy team or something. So you can win community-based grants and that sort of thing. Yeah. So you'll then have a grant writer who finds a scheme that generally government, but there's nonprofits and that sort of thing that are granting bodies who have the money and say, hey, we've got this scheme. Here's the eligibility. This is how much money, and this is what it needs to be for, and this is how you apply. And so for researchers, it's generally Australian Research Council, the ARC, that gives the big grants. Otherwise, it's generally smaller ones for nonprofits in order to fund, say, a PhD student's work. So $5,000 here or there. Level. Whereas, the ARC is really like $300,000 up to
large scale.
Yeah. Right. Sometimes in the millions. And if you have the medical side of thing, it's NHMRC. So National Medical and Health, NHM Research Center.
Right.
That's NHMRC. So anyway, there's a medical side and non-medical side. So I always go for the non-medical side. And the problem with these, though, the problem is the success rate is extremely low, and how much time it takes to actually apply. So there's a scheme for early career researchers called the DECRA, Discovery Early Career Research Award. DECRA. Okay. Yeah, you never want to apply for DECRA if anyone is an academic. And it's just it takes 3 months full time. Over the course of 6 months, you sort of do it. And, instead of actually doing the research, you're trying to get money to do the research. And when I tell the public the success rate of these grants, last year is a 4% success rate in, my year since PhD, and gender was a 4%. That was 2 years ago. Last year, because I was 1 year further past PhD, it became 8%, but that is exceedingly low. And yet, how much time is wasted? So they need to improve the system. They know it's a problem. Okay. So there could be
changes eventually, but yes, one of the ways.
Yeah. So one of the ways that they're trying to improve the process to increase the success rate, decrease the amount of time invested and time wasted, frankly, is to have an expression of interest initially. So you have a 2-pager and you send that off and then they assess that. Okay. And then they decide, okay, it's possibly fundable. Give us a more detailed application. And because they have this funnel, it takes it from initially would have been a 10% success rate, but it turns it into about 40 or 50% success rate by the end because you've already thrown out half the people. So you've saved half those people months and months of time. And isn't that great? Because then they can go do the research that actually is their job and what matters. Yeah. So it's incredibly inefficient. So at the moment, there's a thing called Discovery Project, the DP, with the Australian Research Council. And they've finally moved that one over to this 2-page expression of interest system. They should absolutely be doing it with the DECRA. And I have experienced firsthand them not doing that and the pain and angst that can cause.
As well. Oh, right.
Because, 8%, so 8 out of 100 people will be getting that. Or 4, you know? So I guess a bigger problem is that they keep decreasing the amount of money that they give to science and scientists in Australia. Right. You see the graph, it goes down, down, down. Okay. And yet everything's getting more expensive as well. Right. And so
Is that over a period of time? Is that going up and down, or is this just a gradual decrease?
Gradual decrease.
Okay,
so
right.
it changes depending on what government's in as well, and how much they want science to influence their decisions. And that's the problem. Like, if we don't educate people well in science in, elementary and primary school and that sort of thing, they don't know the value of it. Like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so they don't know it should be a way that we interpret our environment and understand what to do next. It's based on information, not based off of an idea or, I don't know, a story or something like that. We need data and evidence. Okay, this showed that. And it's basically, it's like you wish you could go into the future and see, if we did that, this would happen.
That would be nice.
Well, we effectively largely can do that. And that's what we do with weather predictions, for instance, based on mathematical models. You look at what's happened in the past, you've got data that's come in, you create a model, and then it can predict with high degree of certainty what will happen in the future.
Yeah.
So I know weather forecast might be somewhat of a bad example because it often is wrong, but it's largely because they say a thunderstorm's going to happen, and you just happen to not get hit. There was a thunderstorm somewhere.
Yes.
So people just think,
just not Australia.
Yeah, bomb is bad. They're actually really good. It's just hard to exactly, there's so many factors going in. But the point is that we want to know what's going to happen if we do X, Y, Z. And we wish we had that crystal ball. Well, we largely can if we have good scientists to create models based off of what we've seen in the past, because you're still in the same system, whatever it might be, whether it be a social system, physics, building roads or bridges or whatever, engineering. You use a mathematical model based off of previous information that when we did that happened. And so you can make these decisions based off of how much percentage chance that something will happen. And so you go based off of like the strong decision. Okay, we have a 95% chance that if we do this will happen. Well, that sounds really good. Let's do that.
Right on. And that needs to be implemented more than what
basically
it is.
Using science to guide us. It's
science to guide science.
Our guiding light. Science to guide management and policies. Right. Is what I would say.
Okay, interesting. Okay, right. And that's not something that is that something you would consider trying to make an impact in and change, or are you in your scientific community buddies going to just give it to someone else to do, or you talk about it? I mean, everyone knows in your community. Would you say that the large spectrum of the scientific community, maybe just in nature, would have the same perspective as well, and understanding of the challenges that you face as scientists, or is there a large array of difference of opinion when it comes to this subject?
Well, I think largely in academia, people are starting to realize that science isn't finished until it's communicated. So that's a big aspect. So when you think of SciComm, short for science communication, is okay, you've got this paper, it's in a journal, you've got this ivory tower, and the rest of the public don't have access to it because there's a paywall.
Straight up, yeah, I tried.
Straight up, and that's a whole nother problem, because the researchers often have to pay to get their own work published, and then they charge for it. Whereas if you're doing that with a magazine article like Australian Geographic or something like that, they actually pay you for that content because they make money off of it. Yet we pay.
Right.
And that's the public's money as well.
Yeah, right.
So the public has paid for the research. Then part of that money also has to pay to publish it, and then yet the public don't have access to it. So there's a whole huge problem with that system. It needs a big revolution, that one. Hopefully that comes in the future through pressure.
Makes sense.
And they make billion-dollar profits, on the level with Google and Amazon.
Really?
So during COVID, the only media group to make money and not drop off all the rest, in terms of newspapers and all those sorts of things, the journalists that were making money, they were scientific journals, and they make big dollars. And they are preying upon a broken system and academics who are desperate to get papers to then have an ongoing position or to win the next grant.
Right.
So the fact that it's so competitive, they're leveraging that and saying, oh, you want to be in our high impact journal? Well, the higher the impact, the more money you're going to have to pay.
Yeah,
and that's ridiculous because it takes the same amount of money to run, well, roughly speaking, and a lot of it's digital too. So page charges like...
Yeah, minimal, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely costs involved, they've got to do some things. But
maybe not as many costs as...
When you look at their profits, they're exorbitant.
Yeah, right on. Maybe podcasting isn't the field I should be. Yeah. Journal paper.
Work for Elsid.
Writer-uppering. Wow, that's
that was definitely a tangent. What was your question?
I think it had something to do with it, but it was about to do with science, and that makes sense.
Yeah, so
that was very science. Interesting though. That was very interesting. It's a glimpse into the scientific world, which really is part of learning.
Yeah, and you were saying, do other scientists think of
in
the same way?
Yeah, sounds like potentially so.
I think.
At least in that
area. It draws different people.
They see that there's a problem.
And they want to be part of the solution. They want to, so instead of using like emotion to guide us, or dare I say Bible or something like the Bible, we use data and information and science and the scientific method. It's the best method we know as a planet Earth, in the state we're at now.
Right.
In 2024. That's the best way we know.
Interesting.
So we apply that to problems. We've got wicked problems of the world. There's all sorts of sorts of problems.
I do believe the world is definitely cooked and needs some help. Science definitely has a part to play in that. That's for sure. Yeah. How much I'm yet to have a final say in that, but definitely a part to play.
And individuals too. Like everyone can have an impact.
Yes.
Everyone impacts people around them. No man is an island. John Donne once said very wisely, you like a droplet in a lake, you have ripples and everyone around you listens and sees you, so what you say, what you do can have really big impact around you. And then what's the X factor of them having their ripple effect, if
it's very interesting, like just how it all works. It's trippy when I think about it, like how much how people know people then change people and say something and that impacts them, and then they go and do this and that impacts the whole society. It's quite fascinating, and
I think it makes people feel like they have meaning in life, and I think a lot of people sometimes struggle with that, but
they do.
It's a small little example. Like we've got a habitat garden that we're growing. We just sort of like moved into a new place, finally out of apartments, so we can compost, we can grow locally native plants, support wildlife. And, I started putting some rocks out the front and hollow logs and, these features that give shelter for native wildlife that need it. And, the microhabitat climate is, hot day, they're going to be under that rock and they burrowed in, that sort of thing. So having rocks is quite important. And so anyway, I put that there, and next thing I know, my neighbor has done the same. And she pointed out, oh yeah, I just decided to get that, saw yours. And, and who knows, my street might have, more
just dead trees all over the road. It's a log for habitat, I swear.
Absolutely. It's habitat. Like all our wildlife is struggling, birds are declining 2% every year and has been for decades. And, we're just like losing a lot of species in Australia. And a lot of the land is owned privately. So it's left to private landowners to do their bit to keep these large old trees in the landscape, to enhance what they can, to plant locally native plants. And I'm not talking Australian plants, because they're often freaking from Western Australia that's sold at these large nurseries, the ones, Bunny, or like these boring bird hater plants, and they just, they all just look the same. It's not eaten by a single insect, so therefore it's not providing any habitat that then a lizard will eat because there's crickets around, or, a butterfly will only lay its eggs on a certain plant that it knows that caterpillar will eat, the leaves of that plant. Yeah. And so that's why I gave you a little emu foot plant when I came, spreading the love and supporting the wildlife because they need it. A lot of them are in decline. We've got a global biodiversity crisis, on the planet. And without getting too, doom and gloom, everyone needs to do their bit, and we need to stay on top of developers and politicians as well. To freaking, have some planning and, for wildlife corridors, and I could go on.
Yeah.
Keep the large old trees. You cannot replace them. 400 years old. What, if you go to buy a tree that's 7 years old from a nursery, you're talking $600, and it's only a few meters tall. Well, how about a 30-meter tall tree with a 3-meter,
Base,
diameter?
With hollows and
you're talking that'd be worth millions if you were to try to sell it. You can't, right?
Yeah.
And things that need hollows, we talked about this hollow right here.
Yeah, almost,
there was, it's probably from a tree that's 300 years old.
I would not know.
But they're very slow growing, and by the time they make hollows, which, countless of our species need, whether it be amphibians, birds, mammals, a huge suite of them, up to 30-40% of the species in Australia of each of these different taxa require hollows, and it's all about the old growth trees. So that's just my little tidbit.
Okay.
Do our best to keep every single one, and
but you're passionate. You want to see a
problem.
Difference. You want to see a difference, and one of the ways that you've said is maintaining and keeping the politicians and developers in check, and people that are making,
put the pressure on them.
Yeah, and that private landowners, they have land that they could potentially have a positive impact on a great scale if they only were aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
There's a lot of things everyone can do to just help wildlife along and hopefully prevent extinctions. Yeah,
definitely. Now, with this passion that you have about nature, the 2% decline in birds, everything that you care about, where did it all start? Big question. I'll bring it down. You moved over in 2008 to Australia. And you wanted to, you were playing basketball for 15 years, challenged to kind of say no to that, but you had a passion for wildlife. What was it, what
got me hooked?
Got you hooked, I guess so, yeah. What was that moment that you were like, this is what I really like? Was it a gradual thing, or was it like, wow, that's awesome, I'm going to look into that? What was that for you?
The short answer is probably chameleons.
Right, okay.
The longer answer is...
chameleon farming. No.
Yeah, having reptiles as pets when I was a little girl growing up, because I grew up in a really big city, so I didn't have so much access to nature all the time around me. There wasn't like, a creek I could just go to and just get lost in all the time and find snakes or whatever.
Right.
There was some times when my family would go camping. So like I have siblings, and none of them were into wildlife. My parents weren't into wildlife, but they tolerated my interests. And that was key. So I completely acknowledge my privileged childhood. I mean, we were definitely poor at some stage, but like I had love, I had what I needed growing up, and I wasn't knocked down.
Yeah,
so
you were supported.
I was supported. And so every time I would get a good mark, my parents would give me some money, and that was like an incentive to do well in school. I liked school anyway. I liked learning.
That's a good skill to have. I like school.
Yeah. So anyway, I would save up my money, and then I would go to the reptile store, and that's what I would spend my money on. It wasn't on dresses or new shoes or I don't know what else other people spend money on, but for me it was reptiles. And I would just like go, and I was just totally fascinated. It was just so different, and to see them up close, and so I would just like take them, having it in a cage, and every time I come home from school, I would just say, oh, what are they doing now? And just feeding them. Oh my gosh,
fascination.
The tongues of lizards, it's just like my favorite thing. I just like love their tongues. It's just especially like fleshy, and oh gosh, the chameleon tongue. So anyway, it's a little bit of a long answer, but by the time
lizard tongues, right on.
I love lizard tongues. By the time I was 11, I was breeding chameleons and selling them back to the store who initially made money.
That's so good.
And so I got to see like this whole process.
Tables turned, right on.
Yeah, it was. And it was handy that my dad was a surgeon. So he's an eye surgeon, because the female, which often doesn't lay more than like 4 to 6 clutches of eggs, because it can have like 40 to 50 eggs each batch. So she was pumping them out. And so I kept breeding them, incubating the eggs, looking after the young, little pinhead crickets, pain in the ass thing. Oop, pain in the bum. Anyway, she became egg bound one day.
Yeah.
And it was sad because I saw her in the morning and she had died, and there was like an egg stuck in her. And she had only laid a few. There was a lot more in her stomach. And so my dad was like, oh, I'm a surgeon. Let's do surgery. Let's see if we can recover these eggs. And yeah, just this whole experience of, just working with reptiles on an intimate, close basis, showing my friends. And anyway, yeah, we did get those eggs out.
Yeah,
and it was a success. And it was a lower success rate of hatching compared with had she done it properly.
Yeah. But higher than none.
From
not
yeah, absolutely. Okay. And just the little hands that grab
grabs.
and the tongue that just goes out, and the way their eyes. I mean, just like every bit of wildlife has their cool aspect, and just learning about that, and especially from an ecologist, then the interactions between everything and what impacts, and these systems, and how one thing is removed from a system because people let their cats out and they're bad cat owners. I'm just going to throw that out there. Don't let your cats out, mate. I'm passionate about that. Anyway, there's things called there's things called catios, and it's a cat patio, and get on it.
Yes.
So build it or have someone build it, and it works. And
catio,
you have
that's a good business, right on.
Yeah, catio. And they are going off
straight up.
Yeah. How did we get here?
Why? Hey, you like lizard tongues?
Lizard tongues, the catios.
Yeah, but you like the cats are even the neighbor across the road was called out to me yesterday and asked why her friends' water dragons' throats were getting ripped out and just left there. And I think it's either foxes or cats. There is foxes. Foxes have been seen around where she is, but
probably cats. It was not consumed.
Yeah, not consumed. So it was by sport. So yeah,
that's what they evolved to do. They're highly evolved predators,
and so they need to be
some
inside.
of the most successful predators in the world. And if they were big enough or we were small enough, we would be on that prey
straight
list.
up. Yeah, no, I'm glad that you just keep them in the catio. Keep them in the catio. Get the cat. And so, your dad was there with you when you had that experience with the chameleon? Was there did you have any friends that you liked to go out exploring with? Did you have an uncle and auntie that had snakes, or was this just a natural passion and fascination with the world as a youngster that you managed to get hooked?
Yeah, it was
from
a
wildlife.
bit of a solo endeavor. Like I said, my siblings, my parents, they weren't into it. I didn't have an auntie and uncle who was into it. I just got hooked and was totally fascinated. Okay. I would watch wildlife documentaries on television, and I just kind of wanted more.
And you took that in, you're out on.
Yeah, and I was just like, how? And then when I started learning about the problems of the world and what we're doing to these amazing animals and how their populations are just shrinking to the point of extinction, I just couldn't bear it. And I was just like, we have to do better. Yeah. We have to do something about this. Okay. This is terrible. And so I was like, this passion was sort of, and frustration was just brewing, in my childhood, just wanting to do something. And even in university, just learning more about the problems that were happening, I would just then internalize, okay, how can I help? Okay, I'm doing all these things. And I thought, okay, I'm going to recycle, I'm going to bike, I'm going to do this and do that. And it's funny because then there's a scientific paper comes out and it compares 16 different green choices that you can do, not international flies, instead of recycle or this and that. Number one thing, what is it? Do you know?
Breathe slower.
No, it's to not, or to have one less child or no kids at all if you really want to help the world.
Right.
Anyway, you can do all of these green things. And if you represent these green choices by a bubble and the size of the bubble is how much carbon dioxide you save. So this is in terms of global warming impact on the environment.
Right.
They're all little small specks. Okay, you recycle, you do that. You bike to work, you do whatever green things. You plant native plants. And anyway, the biggest one, fat sucker right in the middle, having one less child, because everything you do is just having to be doubled again to support that child. And it's often not talked about. You think of any environmental problem in the world. There's not one that wouldn't be ameliorated by fewer humans on the planet. And I'm going to be bold and say it. Population.
Yeah, right on. Okay. I mean, I would probably be on the other side of the table to some extent. I mean, I haven't had kids, but I am the oldest of 6 kids. And so...
But that wasn't your choice either.
No, it wasn't.
I'm the youngest of 5. Also not my choice.
No, it's not by choice.
And also there was a different time. Well, at least for me. Like, you're a lot younger than me. But for me, back in the day when I was born, like, there's been like a 30% increase of humans on the planet since then. And our parents, it's been double that. So we weren't having those overpopulation issues back then. Now is a different time. We need to see how it is.
The population definitely, yes, is growing.
We're over capacity.
That is obvious.
In every capacity.
But then
every way, basically, on planet Earth.
Look, I think over nature,
everyone's going to make their own choice.
Yes.
I'm not going to force anybody to make any choice, and I'm not saying that. But at least know the science behind it.
Yes,
that's my point.
With nature and know the science. That's good. Over nature and people, I guess I would say. I mean, I would be more so for people, because I think people were created with purpose, and so I think.
Yeah, I'm not saying no humans. I mean, it's not one or the other. It's more finding a better balance.
That's exactly
we have gone way too far.
That's exactly what I was going to say. We need to be, and it sounds from what you're saying that you are doing exactly what you just said, and that is trying to show people that there is a better way to live by how you live on a smaller scale, and trying to, with all your scientific study and your scientific research, trying to bring light to places such as nature that are less seen. And improve
what we do.
Exactly. And it sounds like what you're doing. It sounds like, which is fantastic. You also said, well, that was one of my questions was there anyone that came alongside you that supported you in your push to where you are today? Mentors, you said you had someone at least someone.
Yeah, well, I'd say probably one of the. So my basketball coach was pretty inspirational back in the day. William Burr,
the 24 guy who made you go back 24 times to the suicide.
Oh gosh, suicides. No, that person I never want to interact with ever again.
Okay, different one.
Yeah, different. This was like a personal coach. Yeah, he was quite inspirational, just from like a human perspective and who you are as a person. To give your best and show respect and. The sort of basic things to become a good person. From a professional's perspective, I'd probably have to say Professor Rob Heinsohn. So he was the one who said yes to me. He became sort of like my host when I was trying to win a Fulbright fellowship.
Right.
And he was like the final piece of this big puzzle I was trying to put together in order to come to Australia. And my project proposal was actually study green pythons up in Iron Range and Cape York. And so that's, so I needed him, and he said yes, and he took a chance on me.
Gave me the opportunity.
And he's a conservation biologist. He runs a difficult bird research group at the Australian National University. An inspirational person. He's probably saved multiple species, and it's through science. And it's to better manage species and prevent declines of and extinctions of our threatened species, particularly threatened birds.
And how did he back you up? Like what was it just the yes by giving, like seeing that someone was willing to give you an opportunity was...
There's more than that.
Yeah.
He was guiding me as well.
Yes.
And so as I was doing my degree, so Masters of Philosophy, MPhil, it's like a half PhD. So instead of coursework, it's a thesis. So it's research. And, he trusted me to run this project and to better understand. It was green pythons, but we switched to palm cockatoos for better umbrella species effect, and conservation capacity there.
Okay, yeah.
It's still same region, a really important region of Australia that, had some human-induced threats and that we were trying to improve basically through our research to bring attention to it, but also to guide management and that sort of thing. And yeah, so he guided me along the way as a conservation biologist. I was budding conservationist. And so, yeah, just using the right method, making decisions, how to navigate, even the social side of things too, working with Indigenous communities up there. And then just helping my scientific writing. My gosh, my first draft was like, I don't know, trying to write a storybook or something. There's a certain type of way you need to write scientific papers, and it's often dry as people describe it. Hence why I like the communication side of things, writing an article.
Well,
it's
not exactly colourful.
It's not exactly colourful. But yeah, we are sort of restricted. We have to do it that way. And yeah, he taught me that. And since then I've been able to write a lot of papers, and he took the time to explain things to me. And every meeting that we had, it was like, he'd start off, how are you? Yeah. He was concerned for
you as a person.
Me as a person, mental well-being. It wasn't just like, what can I get out of you? Yeah. Which some supervisors are definitely like that. And if anyone's thinking about going into academia or thinking about doing a research degree, I would definitely recommend it's about who your supervisor is. That is the biggest factor for whether you're going to be happy. Right. And chat with their previous students or their current students, I should say. Yeah. So you don't
to get the inside scoop of what's going on.
Yeah, you want to know, and yeah, do that in person. Say, I'll buy you a coffee. Let me just chat with you about this person. You'll get the story.
Okay, right.
None of this is online. You can't Google it. But But people know.
Okay.
And you'll find out the good ones and the not so good ones.
Okay. Well, that is a valuable tip, because if you're wanting to get into it, so if you want to be in academia, the person who is leading your team and heading
your research group, the lab,
the person who's running it, has a major impact on the health of the team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And whether they, help your career progress, or you're just viewed as a minion or something in their goals to help them win that next grant or get that next, level in academia, to it just help themselves versus to actually think about the student and have it be about them and what's best for them.
It's about a giving and not just a taking.
Yeah, there's very different ways to go about it, but it's a wide range.
Okay. Well, I would like to, as we land the plane, I would like to give you the questions, and then afterwards, I would like to hear about what you would what was that gentleman's name that let you
Professor
in?
Rob Heinzen.
Professor Robert Heinzen.
Yeah.
What he saw in you, if you had the opportunity and you were in his shoes, what would you look for in a person coming in? All right. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But I want to do these 5 questions: overrated, underrated.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I almost gave you they don't have answers. I keep saying, I almost gave you the answers, but I don't. There's no answers. It's what you want. Okay. So overrated, underrated. I'm going to give you a phrase, sentence, thing. You say whether you think is overrated or underrated. So overrated, underrated. The role snakes have in rodent mitigation.
Oh, underrated.
Hugely.
Oh my God.
Right on.
Yeah,
okay,
I could
proper.
Speak for ages on this, but continue with the game.
Yeah, right. That's a whole podcast topic in itself, sounds like. Number 2, overrated, underrated. Spending time with an individual who hates snakes to help change their view.
I'd actually say overrated. Because I think it's largely about an experience with a snake that is a factor rather than somebody trying to tell you facts.
Okay.
I think the best way to...
Through experience.
Yeah. So in a safe setting, have a non-venomous snake for them to pat and have an experience with. I think those have been the biggest factors that have contributed to people's change in their perception. That's what the papers that I've read so far have concluded
on. Okay, interesting. That makes sense. Number 3, UV bulbs in a snake tank.
Overrated.
Right on. Could you give a little bit of why what it is so people can understand?
Yeah. So circadian rhythms, whether it be light or day, I think there's value in that. But to have it be like UVB, that's important for lizards.
Lizards, yes.
Yeah, and you have these problems where their bones, can't
calcium
utilize the calcium and that sort of thing. So absolutely critical for lizards, particularly growing lizards. Less important if they're already adults and not growing.
Okay.
But
snakes, not a big deal.
Snakes, not a big deal.
Yep, right on. Cool. Overrated, underrated rock climbing.
Probably underrated.
Good source of fitness, exploration, and risk of falling. Keep the excitement up.
I like having a belaying partner, always there.
That knows what they're doing too.
Yeah, someone you trust.
Yeah. You need
Chris.
My man, he's trusting. Number 5, final one, overrated, underrated. Looking for reptiles on a cold day.
Underrated.
Mm?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're just still there. You've just got to
look harder.
Turn rocks. And if you turn the rocks, you better put that back exactly where you put it, where you found it.
Fair.
Microhabitat.
Yes.
Keep it intact. Don't destroy habitat by,
just for looking for wildlife.
Being selfish.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the pluses of being a fauna spotter. It's because you don't have to put it back.
Yeah. Geez. I can't imagine the load that you have just removed off your shoulders when you do this. Right, I'm just pulling this bark off, this exfoliating bark, and you just get to see what's under it. But you cannot do that as just a person going exploring.
Nuh-uh.
If you did, you better be nailing that sucker back on.
Sticky tape or something.
No. I'm talking full-on nailing. But
tape.
Don't pull it to start with.
Yeah.
You find other ways.
Yeah.
Get them crossing the road,
Yeah, and in Australia, it's also very hard to do herping anyway because the legalities behind it as well. I mean, that's also a plus of being a scientist. You get to go out, you get paid potentially to go out and study wildlife such as that magnetic island when you got to go catch and search for death adders for 3 weeks. I think you were 6. Cool. 6
but it
weeks.
Took years to win the grant and to actually get the animal ethics and the
funnel.
permits and oh my gosh, the amount of paperwork you got to do just to be able to do that. Like if people knew the whole story, they'd be like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right on. Okay.
There's a lot of backstory there.
Yeah, well, lucky you got the vigor to get through. Now, so final question or point that I'd like to learn about. Now, you did. Was there anyone else other than this Dr. Forgot his name already. Rob Heinzen.
Yes.
Other than that, has impacted you and your journey through this scientific field? Yeah,
I suppose there's some inspirational people that I'd like to mention. So, people who are doing amazing things and the way they operate, I find quite inspirational. So I think Professor Hugh Possingham, he was former Queensland chief scientist. He's on that many boards. He's everywhere, and yet he's still always just doing bird walks and teaching people how to bird watch. And he's, he was just on the 7:30 report on ABC. He's just everywhere, so active, so giving of his time, and he's across so many topics. It's incredible. He's originally a mathematician, but an extreme conservationist. Like he's next level.
Maths is amazing.
So I see him like all around the place. I hope he actually doesn't hear this because I would be embarrassed. But he has a good way. I think he has so much positive impact and he guides us. He's like our conservation leader, especially in ecology and Center for Conservation and Biodiversity. CBCS, Center for Biodiversity and Conservation Science.
Right.
Sorry, that took a second.
There is a lot of acronyms.
So many acronyms. I'm trying to avoid the acronyms. So he's one. Professor Martine Marin as well. She's similarly very impactful leader in conservation, doing wonderful things. She studies offsets. So when a developer clears an area and in another area, they need to improve, roughly speaking.
Yes.
Largely a system. You just need to not destroy so much habitat. You cannot replace it as a short. But also studying the impacts of noisy miners and what they're doing to our woodland birds. And so people can plant shrubs, not just trees and grass, because that is supporting these bully birds to be just hugely
dogs.
Yeah, hugely
You don't want them.
overpopulated due to how we're planting. So plant shrubs as well. Another person, Professor Emily Taylor. So she studies largely rattlesnakes. In America.
I was going to say we don't have
Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So she's pretty.
That was a snake species.
No. So that's a university.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah,
on.
sorry.
So far, so that sounds like Asphodite something.
Yeah. No, she's an incredible science communicator and just like an indefatigable person. Nothing stops her, and she's just out there all the time. And yeah, she produced this. It seems small, but a sign that says, "This is a safe snake space," and then underneath it says, "Oh, I do not kill snakes." And it's a metal sign that you can put up on your wing fence to your house, basically. And that's exactly what we'll be doing as soon as we build ours.
Yeah, right on.
And it's just
your neighbor's gonna love you
nice.
so much.
Yeah, they'll probably ring us when they've got a snake that they might need removed if it's in their house.
That's a good way. Yes, yeah. Plus $50.
Oh yeah, love doesn't pay the bills.
No, it doesn't.
And you know, a snake catcher is not a council job.
No, it's not. We don't
it
get
might
paid.
be in the Northern Territory, and it might have been decades ago, but it's not the case. And not to mention the risk and the insurance. You know, someone's got to pay those rich bastards.
Yeah. So, final question, I guess, would be again, if you were in the position of the professor that let you in and took a chance on you, what would you look for in someone that would be in your shoes, have been in your shoes?
So a big factor is reliability. Are they reliable? Do they show up on time? You know, do they do what they say they're going to do? Because even if you're super passionate, even if you have lots of knowledge about something, if you're not dependable, what good are you, really? So, and just being a nice person, I think, because our day and whether we had a good day or bad day largely depends on our interactions with people throughout the day.
Wow.
And there was a happiness study that just came out, the longest, biggest happiness study ever run in the history of humans. And the number one thing that contributed to their happiness was good relationships.
Right.
And so that just brings the point that who you work with makes a huge difference on your happiness.
Who you are to some extent. Who you can become.
Well, just whether you have a good day and whether you enjoy where you work and whether you have that job satisfaction, what you work on absolutely will contribute to that. But just be a nice person, have respect, you know, be inclusive, and yeah, I guess beyond that, like people can improve their knowledge, you know, all the time. Read books, read articles that are available to you. Like there is a lot of knowledge just out there. Yeah, initiative's good. Yeah, absolutely.
But more so just be a better human being so you can be good to get along with.
And don't be a know-it-all. That's really annoying.
Okay, the hate, I can do
Gotta
that.
have an open mind.
Yeah.
Like you might know a lot about something, but you don't know it all. And so just always have an open mind.
Humility,
keep learning.
Yeah.
And yeah, it can be a two-way street, you know, like even as I supervised like 15 students so far, and I'm open to learning from them. I ask them questions. Oh, okay, so how did you find this? Or what would you recommend for that? Like I'm always going to be learning for the rest of my life. And you know, that's who I've chosen as a partner as well. Somebody who's fundamentally happy, but also an open mind. That is a huge factor for
top
me.
notch bloke. Yeah,
and he's just always wanting to learn and have an open mind
and learn.
Yeah,
not content with learning a certain amount, but learning as much as you can, and having a drive to do so.
To continue.
Yes.
Yeah, never stop learning.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you have enjoyed this episode. If you'd like more information, or if you think there is someone that I should have on the show, you can find the details such as the platforms you can reach out to me on in the show notes below. Anything about the podcast or the podcast guest will be in the show notes. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.